Welcome everybody to Forza Horizon 5, and today we're taking a look at the 1966 Ford Lotus Cortina. Now before we start with this review, you might be wondering why I'm reviewing this car. Well, there's a whole heap of cars on this game that I have yet to review on previous Forza games, either the Motorsport series or Horizon series, and with this being one of my favourites that I've yet to have a look at, I figured we'd give this a short a review and yeah, hopefully highlight it to some people that might not know of this car. So yeah, this is a basically a Ford, but it's also a Lotus as well, but it's on this game it is under the Ford brand, even though there's only a very minimal amount of Ford actual labelling on the vehicle, but still it is based on the Mark I Cortina, which was produced between 1963 and 1966, and yeah, it's got a whole host of improvements to it, but not far too many for me to go through in high detail, but this is the headline stuff. It's got improved front and rear suspension, lightweight or alloy panels for the doors, boot and bonnet. All of the cars were painted in white with a green stripe down the side. It's also got front disc brakes, and the battery was relocated to the boot to improve weight distribution. It's also got these unique front quarter bumpers, which weren't on the standard car, and yeah, it's also got the revised dashboard on the interior. So you've got your rev counter, you've got your speedometer, you've got all of your other dials like oil and water and fuel. We've also got a slightly altered gearbox center console, but to fit the new gear ratio way that the gears worked on this one compared to the standard Cortina. But still, inside, despite being a car that was really rather sporting for the time and basically a homologation car for racing, it's still a really rather practical car. You've got rear seats with plenty of leg room, and you've also got a decent sized boot as well, despite the battery being in there and the spare wheel having to be moved to the front, the rear left, to accommodate all the new suspension parts in the rear and all the new chassis stiffening. And yeah, it's also got a massively improved engine, a Lotus built engine, twin cam, 1.6 litres and inline 4. So yeah, which doesn't turn out the most amount of power you've ever had in an engine, but it's still 115 horsepower and 108 pounds-feet of torque, which is, pardon me, which is plenty for a car that only weighs 2,060 pounds, which is not very much at all. Now granted, fellow kind of sporty kind of cars like the Mini Cooper S and the Renault 8 Gordini are less in terms of weight than this car, and in the case of the 8 Gordini it is a more practical car with its 4 doors, although it doesn't really have any boot space. It's still more powerful than either of those cars despite being weightier as well, and with the extra power it is also quicker in terms of acceleration and top speed. And yeah, I love this car, quite frankly. I love the looks of it. I love the fact it's made for, basically the racetrack, but it's still a practical saloon car at the end of the day, and arguably this is the innovator in terms of sport saloons. I know everyone gives that credit to the likes of the M5, but yeah, this for me is that kind of originator as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, but nonetheless, let's get out onto the open road and see what this car can do. So yeah, even though this doesn't have all that much in the way of power, we're still going to take it on the drag strip just to see what it can do. So yeah, let's get to the speed camera, see how fast we're going before we hit it, and then we'll get it round its real part where it's really good at is on the track. So let's take a look what it can do. So yeah, it's only got a 4-speed gearbox, which is pretty much the weakest part of this car. It really doesn't make the most of the power as far as I'm concerned, but still, it does mean at least you've not got a lot of gears to shift through to get to the power and the like. So yeah, so that's what we're going to do. Pretty much 93 miles an hour, which is pretty decent for a car of this age with that amount of power. Certainly wouldn't be getting up to that kind of speed in other kind of small lightweight cars of the time that were also decently powerful, like the Mini and the Renault 8 Gordini. And yeah, even though I don't think the handling on this is quite up to the 8 Gordini's, lightweightedness and the fact that it's so agile, I still think this is a really, really good handling car. So let's take a look at the handling. Let's get around the track, see just what it's capable of. So yeah, but it's still, at the end of the day, a 1960s car, so it's still got drum brakes at the rear. It's still got quite soft suspension, so there's a lot of body roll. But because of the short wheelbase, it's only 98 inches for instance, and the lack of weight, it's still a pretty damn agile and nippy car. So yeah, we're in D class. I don't think we've had a D class car on one of these reviews for a while. So there's the stats. As you can see, the speed and the handling are pretty good. The acceleration is decent, but the braking is the real weak point with this outside of the gearbox. Because yes, it's got front disc brakes, but like I said, it's only got drums at the rear, and even disc brakes back in the 60s weren't as quite up to scratch as they are today. So yeah, but again, you've got to look at the context of the time that it was made, and yeah, there was definitely, I imagine, some to-ing and fro-ing between Ford and Lotus between what this car can and can't do and what it should and shouldn't be able to do, because, you know, Ford at the end of the day is a big conglomerate and Lotus is was a lot smaller at the time and far more focused on the whole racing aspects. But regardless, let's see what this car sounds like and then we'll talk about it some more. So yeah, I love the sound of that twin cam engine. It sounds far meatier and more powerful than it actually is. But that's no bad thing, because at the end of the day you're going to be on normal roads and you don't want a car that's all go and no noise, whereas I prefer noise and a decent amount of go. So yeah, it's got power and, you know, acceleration and speed that is usable on an everyday basis, and which is only a good thing when you consider this is obviously still an everyday kind of car. It's got, you know, plenty of room inside for people and stuff, and there's plenty of boot space as well. But at the end of the day, it's also more than capable at, you know, getting around a track properly quick. And yeah, acceleration is pretty decent as well for a car of this type, with the amount of power it's got. 0 to 60 is dealt with in 9.680 seconds. 0 to 100 is dealt with in 32.479 seconds. And it will go into a rather decent top speed of 113 miles an hour, which, yeah, has the Renault 8 Gordini licked by 1 mile an hour, and the Mini by several miles an hour, and yeah, far quicker than both to 60, which, yeah, this is only the one of the three that is able to do it in under 10 seconds. So, yeah, properly quick into the straight line speed for sure. The handling is a little bit on the lesser side, as far as I'm concerned. Like I said, it's got quite a lot of body roll, with that suspension not being the, not being the best in the world. Obviously, Lotus did do a big overhaul over the original Cortina, but it's still way too soft and way too wallowy at times. But because it doesn't have as much in the way of weight, it's nowhere near as bad as it could be. If it was, you know, the standard Cortina at its standard weight, I guarantee this would be a lot worse to drive with this level amount of power and speed on the go. So yeah, I do think the Gordini is slightly better in terms of handling and braking, but again, that's probably just because it's such a lightweight car. It's got near 200 pounds less, or even maybe slightly more than that than this. So yeah, the fact that that weighs even less than this is why that is as good as handling as it is, because at the end of the day this is still a good handling car, and you can see why it was as competitive as it was. This was able to keep up with Mustangs at the time, which definitely had a lot more power than this, even with this having the race engine in it, which was like 160 horsepower, something like that. So yeah, more than capable as a sports saloon, and yeah, an originator in that kind of regard, and yeah, more than able to keep up with, if not beat, the competition at the time in the same kind of class as this. So yeah, overall a great car, and yeah, one I am kind of ashamed of that I hadn't reviewed sooner, but I am glad at least that I've gotten around to it eventually. So yeah, this is in the base game, so you don't have to do anything or jump through any hoops to get it. Just buy it and it's all yours, and yeah, it's well worth getting, and it's certainly well worth trying out. So yeah, nonetheless, thank you for watching. There are going to be plenty more of these you know, more classic kind of car reviews coming in the future, and I hope to see you then. So thank you for watching. Bye.